Hi, in this video we are going to talk about how to crack MBA CET 24. Let's get started. Now before we get into the core discussion on how to crack CET, let's first talk about the important dates and the test structure. Now when it comes to dates for CET this year, it is going to be conducted on 9th and 10th March, and as usual CET will be conducted in multiple slots. So typically you have 2 slots on day 1 and 2 slots on day 2. As it has been the case previously, it is going to be a 150-minute paper with 200 questions. Now please note that for every question that you answer correctly, you get +1 and there's no negative marking in CET. In addition to this, you will not have any sectional time limit or sectional cutoffs. Now last year and the year prior as well, CET paper was a jumbled paper, which means that the 200 questions that you had were not split in different sections. So typically the distribution that you have on the CET is 75 questions of logical reasoning, 25 questions of abstract reasoning or visual reasoning, 50 questions of quantitative aptitude that also includes the data interpretation questions, and then 50 questions of verbal ability and reading comprehension. So for a very long time, CET used to be a sectional paper, and prior to that, it used to be a jumbled paper. So we don't know what it will be this year. You should be mentally prepared that there may not be any sectional breakup. So there are 3 possible formats. One is where the sections appear at the top, so you can jump from one section to another and solve whatever questions you like. The second format that can happen is that it is a completely jumbled paper, wherein you don't know what the first question is going to be. It could be from, let's say, quant. The second question could be from verbal. The third question could be from abstract reasoning. And the third thing that is possible is that the questions of a particular area appear together the way it happened in last year's CET. So that gives you a lot of freedom to jump from one question to another and to jump from one section to another if at all it comes in a sectional manner. Now let's talk about a few more important points that you as a test taker should remember. So as I mentioned previously as well, there may or may not be sectional breakup of questions, and you have to be mentally prepared for this, because till the time the day 1 slot 1 happens, you will not be able to figure out whether the question appeared in a jumbled manner or it was a sectional paper. And that is why the mocks that we have designed, the SimCETs that we offer to all the students, we have given 2 types of test. One wherein it is a sectional breakup, and 2 where it is not a sectional breakup. The second thing that you should keep in mind is that you can take calculated risk as there's no negative marking. So make sure that when you're solving the test, do not leave any questions unanswered, because that is something that you'll have to do on the last day or the day of the CET. The third thing that you should keep in mind is that CET has greater emphasis on logical reasoning. So you have to practice that a lot. Considering even if it is a jumbled paper, you will have roughly about 75 questions that appear from the logical reasoning area. So you have to ensure that it is one of the strengths that you have. Another thing is the weightage of pure quant, and that is going to be on the lower side. So even if, let's say, you are somebody who is not that great at quant, you should still be able to crack CET with comfort. And finally, the speed, the selection of questions, and the accuracy. All these 3 things are extremely crucial to get a high score. If you are fast but your accuracy is a problem, then your score will be on the lower side. Versus if, let's say, you are somebody who has high accuracy but you are slow, then also you'll not be able to hit the score that you need. And that is why you have to work on 3 things: speed, selection of questions, and the accuracy. Now let's talk about scores to target. So what I have done is I have looked at CET 2020, 2019 and 2018. Now you must be wondering, I'm making this video in 2024 and why are we talking about CET 2018, 19 and 20? Now the thing is, if you look at CET 21, 22 and 23, there have been some ups and downs in terms of how it was conducted. Last year, for example, in slot 1, a lot of people got 180 minutes to solve the test, and then there was a retake and so on. Plus, in the last 2 years, they have stopped reporting the raw score or the scaled scores that the students have obtained. What they are doing simply is just reporting the percentile obtained by the student. And that is why it is not possible to figure out as to what score corresponded to what percentile in the last 2 years. And that is why I've looked at the last 3 years prior to that, which is CET 2020, 19 and 18. Now it tells you a lot of interesting things. So what I've done is I've put the score range, and what was the rank versus percentile corresponding to that particular score range. So as you can see, I've highlighted something here. So that 141 to 145 or 136 to 140, why I have highlighted this is because typically that is where the JBIMS cutoff is. So if you look at the Maharashtra state candidate cutoff for Jamnalal Bajaj, it revolves around 99.9 plus. And if you look at the last 3 years, which is 18, 19, 20, what you will observe is that that percentile that you need corresponded to roughly about a score of 136 to 145. Now, depending on how difficult the paper is, these cutoffs and the benchmarks are going to obviously change. But 3-year data at least tells a story. It tells you that if you are targeting JBIMS, you definitely should be targeting a score of 136 plus. If the paper turns out to be easy, that number can go even as high as 150. Talking about CET from let's say 2007, 8, 9, the topper used to be close to around 170 and JBIMS used to close at around 150, 151. If you look at 18, 19, 20, you look at the topper score. It is somewhere in the range of 156 to 165. So you should be targeting at least a 135 if you are targeting JBIMS in a moderate paper. Continuing on the score versus the percentile, if you look at the score range of 96 to 105, that is where typically a 94-95 percentile lies. And why that is important is because if you're targeting top 15 institutes through the Maharashtra CET, that's the figure that you should be aiming for. So at no point you should be aiming for a score which is less than 100. You should always be targeting more than 100 if you want to get into the top 15 institutes. Now, what is the utility of this table that I've shown you? Whenever you take SimCETs, whenever you take the full-length papers, what you should do is go back to this table and try and figure out that if the SimCET that you just took, if this was the actual CET paper, how much your score would have corresponded to. So let's say you take a SimCET and you have scored let's say 110. That 110 is roughly in the range of 96 to 97 percentile in the actual CET. So that is how you can use this particular table and gauge where do you stand in terms of the actual CET. So now I'm going to talk about a few small steps that translate to very high impact. The first thing is going to be reading. Now reading for 30 to 45 minutes every single day, if you do it, it will help you to get better at RC. And it will also increase your reading speed, because of which you'll be able to read even a quant question or LR set in a faster manner. The second thing that I want all of you to focus on is going to be the things that you need to by heart, which is tables, squares, reciprocals, cubes, and then A to Z. I've seen a lot of times when I go for these tests, somebody who is sitting next to me who is a student, underprepared student to be specific, will start writing A to Z on the rough sheet that is given, which is A1, B2, C3 and so on till Z26. But why are you writing these things down? Ideally, you should be by-hearting it. So you should know the position of the individual letters. You should know, for example, T is 20. You should know square of 21 is 441. So a lot of these things that you can easily by heart, do it right away. The third thing that I will suggest is to solve a lot of questions without pen and paper. What I've seen is people don't practice this offline and then they're not able to do it while they're actually taking a test. So that is why you have to solve questions without pen and paper. In addition to this, a lot of times I get this question, which topic should I skip? Now the answer is very simple. Don't skip a topic entirely because you still have about 40 days ahead of you. Especially formula dependent topics are the ones that you should not be skipping. For example, think of logarithms, think of mensuration. They have very limited set of formulae. If you just do those formulae and solve maybe 3 to 5 questions of each of those types, you will be in a position to answer all the easy questions that appear from these areas. And that is why do not leave a topic entirely. The last thing that I want to focus on is replicating test conditions as much as possible. So what you should do is when you're taking a SimCET from home, sit in front of your laptop and do nothing for the first 30 minutes and then you start solving the paper. So you solve the paper for the next 2.5 hours. While you're solving the test, make sure that you have limited set of rough sheets with you, you have a ballpoint pen with you, and the entire test conditions, the environment in which you are taking the test should be as close to the test as possible, which means not having any sort of disturbances. So what you should do is close yourself in a room, isolate yourself, take a test as if it is the actual CET, and that will translate to a higher score for you. Let's now move to the next section. So let's now talk about the areas that you should be focusing on if you want to crack CET. Now, what we have done is, based on the observations of the last several years, we have categorized the topics under 4 quadrants. The first quadrant, as you can see, refers to high speed, high accuracy. So these are the question types that you'll be able to solve faster and more accurately as well. Now, what are these topics? In QA, that will be simple arithmetic questions and calculations questions. Under analytical reasoning or logical reasoning, these will be simple arrangements and syllogism based questions. In VRC, that would be direct RCs and grammar based questions. And in case of visual reasoning, it is going to be analogies. So these are the must do areas for you wherein you will get high speed and high accuracy. Moving on to the second quadrant, which is high speed, which means that you will be able to solve these questions under 45 seconds, but low accuracy areas. In quant, that becomes calculation based inequalities. So a lot of times you get these inequality based comparison questions, which sometimes people struggle with. Under analytical reasoning, that is going to be odd man out or analogy based questions. And under VRC, that is going to be the verbal logic, assumption, inference, conclusion, strengthening and weakening argument, and probably true, probably false kind of questions. Now let's talk about the third quadrant, wherein you can have topics that have high accuracy, but they have low speed. So these are the questions that will typically be time consuming. Under quant, that is going to be DI questions. So if you have a set wherein you have a lot of values with decimal places and so on, it becomes a little difficult to calculate. Under analytical reasoning, that is going to be input output or sequential output questions, coding decoding questions, and some complex arrangements. In VRC, that would be long RCs. So anything that is more than 5 or 6 paragraphs typically would fall under this particular category. And then moderate kind of parajumbles. Now typically in CET, parajumbles are of 2 types. You have one type wherein you have 5 sentences and you have to arrange it. And sometimes you have one long paragraph and the middle 5 or 6 are jumbled. And then they ask you to find which will be the first, the third, the fifth sentence, and so on, when arranged in a coherent manner. And in the final thing, which is the visual reasoning, you can have series questions which are typically high accuracy but low speed area. And moving on to the last quadrant, which is low speed, low accuracy. These are the topics where you will not only find it difficult to get more marks, but also you will take more time to solve these questions. So in quant, that is going to be number series. So for example, 4, 6, 8, what is the next one? Of course, this is an oversimplification of what kind of questions you get, because a lot of times these questions will not have straightforward logic and you will get stuck in a loop and just keep thinking as to what the answer is. Under reasoning, that is going to be abstract puzzles. So a lot of times these random puzzles make appearance. So don't spend a lot of time on these questions. In VRC, that would be complex parajumbles and abstract passages. So for example, a passage on philosophy might be difficult for a lot of people. And lastly, under visual reasoning, that is going to be odd man out question type, because you're going to spend a lot of time. Sometimes the logic hits you, sometimes you're not able to find it. So while you're solving questions, when you're practicing at home, figure out if whatever you're solving, is it a high scoring area or not? Is it something that will give you high accuracy, or is it something that will give you high speed? And basis that, while you're solving, make an estimate as to where you should be spending more effort. Now let's talk about SimCET analysis, because this is going to be the most important area and the one that will create a lot of differentiation between two candidates. Now the first thing that you should do is, after you've taken the full length paper, is looking at the questions which you are not able to solve or the ones that you got wrong. So solve all the skipped and the wrong questions before visiting the solutions. And take your time. You don't really have to time yourself while doing this activity. Just take your time, try to solve all these questions to figure out your potential score. The second thing that you should be looking at is your attempts and accuracy equation. For example, 180 questions solved with 80% accuracy is same as 160 questions with 90% accuracy. Figure out who you are. Are you somebody who is able to attempt more questions, compromising your accuracy? Or are you somebody who is a little bit conservative? You'll attempt fewer number of questions, but you will have high accuracy. What we have observed is that you cannot be on both extremes. So you cannot be somebody who is very fast, but your accuracy is very low, or somebody who is not that fast but accuracy is very high, because it will not translate into the score that you desire. Now, the third important thing to consider is going to be how much time you're spending roughly on a particular area. So for example, when you look at all the questions, and even if it is a jumbled paper, you can do this exercise. So what you will do is, for example, under abstract reasoning or visual reasoning, you have, let's say, 5 questions in the first half, then you have about 20 questions in the second half, and so on. What you need to focus on is how much time am I spending in totality. So if I consider these 25 questions, how much time I am spending on this particular area. So for abstract reasoning or visual reasoning, that number should be somewhere in the range of 20 to 25 minutes. For VRC, somewhere around 30 to 35 minutes. For quant, 40 to 45, and for LR, 45 to 60. This sort of a time distribution will ensure that you are not overspending time on one particular area or underspending time in another area. So try to ensure that you are finding balance in terms of how you are approaching the paper. And why we're doing this entire exercise is to figure out what are the topics that we should be working on. So when you take a mock and you do the mock analysis, you need to figure out that these are the topics that I'm going to work on before I take the next CET. So that's where you have to find the growth plan and figure out what are the areas that I need to work on. You do that, you keep on doing this exercise, which is taking a mock, finding areas of improvement, working on it, taking the next mock. And you just keep doing this exercise, and that will translate into higher score. So to conclude this discussion, let's talk about what you should be doing over the next 40 odd days that you have. The plan that I'm going to suggest is going to involve one SimCET on alternate days. Now what you do is basically take a CET. So let's say you take the SimCET on Monday. On the same day, you try to analyze that particular test thoroughly. Once you have identified the areas that you need to work on Tuesday, you can solve more questions from those areas. Then again, you repeat the exercise starting Wednesday. So every alternate day, you take one SimCET with thorough analysis. All the past SimCETs that you may have taken and all the future SimCETs that you're going to take, you should analyze each and every paper thoroughly. In addition to this, one very important exercise is maintaining the error log. Now, what is an error log? It is essentially a repository of all the mistakes that you have made. So let's say, for example, in a particular question, you misread what was being asked, or in a particular question, you miscalculated. So note down all the mistakes that you're making across the different sections that are out there. In addition to that, maintain a formula or concept book. So whenever you come across a new formula or a concept, try to write it down somewhere. Now, once you have these two things in your arsenal, you just have to refer to them at regular intervals. The fourth thing that I want you to focus on is mastering intelligent guesswork and option elimination. A lot of times in CET, you will encounter questions wherein you don't really have to solve the entire question. You just need to figure out what is the right answer by doing some sort of option elimination. For example, a question wherein all values are multiples of 7, and you look at the option and then you realize there's only one multiple of 7, which could probably be the answer. So you'll have to master a lot of these techniques. So whenever you're solving questions at home and you're taking SimCETs, try to do option elimination to figure out or at least narrow down the options and figure out the most appropriate answer that way. And lastly, one very important aspect. Over the next 40 days, you have to stay in the best shape mentally and physically. Physical shape means eating the right food, making sure that you're getting enough sleep of about 7 to 8 hours. A lot of these things may seem to be very small, but they create a lot of difference. In terms of your mental health, what I would suggest is stay away from negative people. A lot of times you will meet people who will tell you that it is not possible for you to achieve a certain objective. Stay away from all the negative people, and any sort of misinformation, also stay away from that. If you do this, I'm sure over the next 40 days, you'll be able to maximize your preparation. And that brings us to the end of this video. I hope you have found this video useful. If you have any questions regarding CET or the admission process, feel free to leave a comment and we'll try to get back at the earliest. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, do it right away. Thank you so much for watching. Wish all of you all the best.